Hello again, everyone. Welcome to Cotton Grower Magazine's Cotton Companion Podcast. I'm Jim Stedman, editor of Cotton Grower, and we're going to wrap up 2022 with this episode so that we, and hopefully like all of you, dear listeners, can take a peaceful and likely well-earned holiday break. And here to help close out the year, my good friend and associate, Beck Barnes. So is holiday excitement starting to build around your house, Beck?
Yeah. I mean, in certain corners of the house, certainly. No, it's good. Yeah, we're fired up. We're getting ready. Just had a big family holiday Christmas party over the weekend, and boy, I got to get going on these gifts. I have been I get going on my gift buying on about the 23rd. On average traditionally, and I got a kid now, and so I can't do. I look up under that tree, it's looking barren, and I gotta get going, Jim. I gotta grow up and turn into a full-grown adult.
Is she mobile now? She walking?
We're 15 months, we're walking around. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's probably not bad that you don't have presents under the tree.
That's a very generous way of. I appreciate that, Joseph. I need you to keep you around, give me like life affirming.
And in any valuable family heirloom ornaments, make sure they go up high.
Oh yeah. We've learned that the hard way. We've had a couple of get out the dustpan and broom moments already. So yeah, but I appreciate that advice. Yeah.
All right. Just speaking from experience.
Yeah, I know you are.
Yeah. Well, moving on. We know this year's cotton harvest is pretty much wrapped up, but there's still a lot of discussion and decisions pending about the 2023 crop year. And we're going to talk about some of those challenges ahead in just a few minutes as we hear from Dr. Darren Hudson, who's professor of economics and the Combest Endowed Chair for Agricultural Competitiveness at Texas Tech University. I'll let Darren explain that title because primarily there's more to it than what he uses. And it's impressive to hear when you put it all out there.
Yeah, the title's impressive alone without an explanation.
Definitely. Well, the first unveiling of new cotton varieties for 2023 occurred December 10th at the Delta Pine meeting, where they announced their class of 23 lineup during their annual NPE Summit. I had the privilege of being there with roughly 150 of the top cotton growers in the U.S. who are all part of Delta Pine's new product evaluators program. Which just completed its 15th year of evaluating potential new varieties in on-farm trials. And we're going to talk about the 5 varieties that those growers recommended here in just a moment. NPE is always a good meeting. A lot of good information and a lot of good discussion. And I know Beck and I both covered it for cotton growers since the program began. And Beck, I think you've probably been to maybe 1 or 2 more than I have at this point.
But that used to be my thing. And many years ago, I used to volunteer to cover that event because they always go somewhere neat, somewhere fun. They took me to one of the years I covered, they went to Charleston, and the next year we were in New Orleans, and always good food and a good time. An informative meeting, of course. They do a great job being transparent with how they commercialize their varieties there at Delta Pine, and explaining, why they make the decisions they do. And it's just a great program all around. And for good and selfish reasons, I used to go and eat big and have a big time, and also do a little bit of, editorial.
And also get a little bit of work done.
Right.
Yeah. But we'll circle back around to that in just a minute. Before we move ahead, I want to take a moment to remember our 2025 Cotton Grower Cotton Achievement Award winner. It's Kenneth Hood of Gunnison, Mississippi. Kenneth passed away on December 1st at the age of 81. And his name is well known throughout the U.S. cotton industry. He's an innovator. He's just one of the top growers that people who have truly influenced the industry. And the accolades and remembrances for Kenneth have always tout his tireless work ethic, his innovation, his business sense, his helpful and friendly nature, his dedication to making the cotton industry better, and his devotion to his family. As long as I've known him, he's always been involved in cotton industry leadership. He was served as president of the Southern Cotton Ginners Association and as chairman of the National Cotton Council. He was also the first cotton farmer in the U.S. to plant the first Bollgard variety in his fields back in the mid-90s. And just prior to his passing, he had been named to the 2022 class of the Cotton Research and Promotion Hall of Fame by Cotton Incorporated and the Cotton Board. Now, personally, I will never forget the times that Kenneth would stop what he was doing, and trust me, he was always doing something important, to talk or answer questions or explain things from his own unique perspective. And Beck, I know you've had experiences and conversations with Kenneth in the past too. And
Yeah, well, when I think about Mr. Hood, I think about, the times that he would show up. He's one of these guys that sees the big picture, right? He sees the industry as a whole that you see. So, these guys who are big and deep into, for instance, NCC leadership, they see the big picture and supporting and shining a light on the industry as a whole. And he saw it that type of way. He would always come to our Achievement Award luncheons when we had them, where he could get to them, particularly in the Mid-South, or back when we used to host it at the Beltwide. He would be front and center. He was very proud to have won that award, like you say, back in 2005. And he wanted to be in the audience to clap for and to give a pat on the back to the next year's winner whenever he could. And, just a good guy, a cheerleader for the industry, a leader in the industry. And, we've just seen so many remembrances from so many people, particularly there in Mississippi and around the industry over the past few days since he passed. And he's going to be missed.
Yeah, he was, I think the best way to state it, was he was a gentleman and a visionary. And this cotton industry is better because of him.
No doubt.
So now let's shift gears. Let's talk a little bit about what Delta Pine is bringing to the market for 2023. The Delta Pine class of 23 features 2 new Bollgard 3 Thrive On cotton with XtendFlex technology varieties. It's really starting to stretch out into a long sentence of its own.
Yeah.
Along with 3 new Bollgard 3 XtendFlex cotton varieties, all of which, of course, were grower proven through this year's NPE program. It also has a strong native trait package, including a new Bollgard 3 XtendFlex variety with resistance to root knot nematode and bacterial blight. 4 of these new varieties demonstrate resistance to bacterial blight, and all 5 show moderate tolerance to verticillium wilt. So as you're going to see as we kind of go through these, they've got some good things coming for pretty much for all regions of the cotton belt.
Yeah, but before you get going, I'll just say that's a big class. I mean, those guys have been, I know that Keelan Golston's still doing some work on it. I know Eric Best from out there in West Texas, but he gets all across the belt, has been working on these. They were busy.
Yeah, they definitely had a busy year. And, and I talked with Keelan and Eric both at the meeting, and one of these varieties that they're extremely excited about, as were a lot of growers. In fact, I think they were getting threatened by growers if they didn't add this variety in this year. So and we'll start with that one, which is Delta Pine 2333 B3XF. The best way they describe it as an impressive mid-maturity Bollgard 3 XtendFlex variety that fits the Mid-South, the Southeast, and South Texas markets. It has resistance to bacterial blight, outstanding yield potential. It was demonstrated in the plots, excellent fiber quality potential, and delivered some farm record yield averages for several NPE growers. This one was kind of the no-brainer variety to bring in next year. Next on the list is Delta Pine 2328 B3T XF, and that's a mid-maturity Bollgard 3 XtendFlex with Thrive On to fit the Mid-South, Southeast, Upper Gulf Coast, and Brazos Bottoms regions of Texas with moderate resistance to bacterial blight. Next is another Thrive On variety, Delta Pine 2317 B3T XF, which is an early maturity variety for the Mid-South and the Texas markets. Again, outstanding fiber quality potential and bacterial blight resistance. We have Delta Pine 2335, which is B3XF, which is a mid-maturity Bollgard 3 XtendFlex variety for the West Texas markets with resistance to bacterial blight and tolerance to verticillium wilt. And finally, Delta Pine 2349 NR-B3XF. And that's a mid to full maturity variety for the Southeast that offers resistance to both root knot nematodes and bacterial blight. So yeah, as you said, this is really, for the last couple of years, it's been a fairly small class, small but very impressive class. This year, with 5 new varieties coming out. Now, the one thing you have to keep in mind is at this point, the varieties with the Thrivon gene in it are going to be under a stewarded production next year, as they still are awaiting the final registration approvals for.
Oh yeah, I didn't think about that.
But that's not going to stop them from bringing it to market, and there are plans in place to take care of that situation. And again, realistically, like any introductory year, quantities of these varieties are going to be in pretty limited supply, and I think demand's likely going to be high. So if you're interested in getting your hands on any of these new varieties, probably need to get in touch with your local Delta Pine rep ASAP. So now I want to share my interview with Dr. Darren Hudson. We were both at the NPE Summit. We had a chance to sit down and visit about the current price status for cotton, some competitive factors for next year, and some thoughts on where cotton acreage might be for 2023. So here's our discussion. Well, we're here in Tampa, Florida at the Delta Pine NPE conference, or our summit, I guess is what they call it at this point, and visiting with Dr. Darren Hudson from Texas Tech. He is a professor and the Larry Combest Endowed Chair for Agricultural Competitiveness and Director of the International Center for Agricultural Competitiveness. Darren, thanks for joining us on the Cotton Companion today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
First of all, you've got this long title. What the heck?
Yeah, well, it used to be the Cotton Economics Research Institute, and then they wanted to change it to match the endowed chairs thing. So now you're saying the endowed chair's name twice. I always shorten to say the Combest Endowed Chair. Just leave it at that.
Well, one of the things you talked about this morning is the good news this year is the bad news is not as bad as it was back, say, in the 1980s. Can you kind of elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think a lot of people look at the rise in interest rates that we've seen in the last few months as the Fed's tried to stamp out inflation. We had high inflation in the 1980s. We've got inflation now. So some people lose perspective of the idea that today is like it was in the 1980s. But there's a couple of things. One is the inflation rate's obviously not nearly as high, nor are the interest rates.
Right.
But certainly, U.S. ag today is less leveraged than it was in the 1980s. So, yeah, the rise in interest rates matter. It hurts the bottom line in terms of production expenses. But you don't have debt service being 40% of your operating budget, and so it's something that we can weather. It's going to hurt. Obviously, any of these kinds of changes hurt, but I think we need to keep it in perspective and keep our eyes on the ball and keep moving forward, because I think most farmers are going to be fine. They may have to make some adjustments, but I think they'll be fine. It's not like the 80s where we're going to see massive farm failures.
Yeah, we're not going to see 14 to 18% interest rates.
No. Well, I hope not, for sure.
Let's hope not. Been through that before.
Yeah, exactly.
Been through that before. You talked a little bit about acreage. Looking at it, and you and other economists that I've talked to, I think everybody seems to go back to this corn-cotton ratio.
Right.
It's sort of a guide on it. But growers that we've been talking to tend to be a little bit more optimistic right now. And I guess part of that is just cotton growers
right.
and everything. In this current environment, do we really know where acres are going to fall next year?
No, you make a good point. The corn-cotton ratio that a lot of people use is sort of a first cut at looking at what that's going to be like. Cotton farmers are sort of eternal optimists anyway. You have to be to grow cotton. But I think, there's some reason for that optimism, looking at, there's a long time between now and when that insurance price gets set and those final planting decisions are made. And so, there's a lot of room for those variables to change. And corn's not the only determining variable,
Right.
obviously, in that complex. There's a lot of cotton farmers that are just going to be cotton farmers. 50 cents, 90 cents, it's going to be cotton farm. Yeah, they're just going to grow for cotton. I think where the corn cotton ratio thing comes into play is thinking about at the margin. Those producers have good options at where they can rotate out. In our part of the world, for example, in West Texas, one of the big concerns is about the wheat price, and there's a lot of wheat in our area. Went behind failed cotton as a cover crop, but we've gotten good rain this fall, and we're going to have a wheat crop. And at current wheat prices, it may make more sense for them to ride that out to grain and harvest it than to try to terminate it and go back to cotton. So there's a lot of uncertainties, a lot of things we don't know that are yet to be determined in that cotton, what that cotton planted acre is going to be.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned rain in Texas, and trust me, I live in the Memphis area.
Right.
For the last 2 weeks, we've been under this dome of, gray skies and rain. I think Mother Nature's trying to refill the Mississippi River within 2 weeks on it. But I think in Texas, you were talking about sort of a moderating La Nina, and I've heard that from a number of sources. What's that going to mean to growers?
Well, so in general, La Nina is bad for winter moisture. You generally get a hotter, drier summer. An El Nino means a cooler, wetter summer, and so there's a bit of a trade-off there in the sense that we need the heat units, but you also need the rainfall. And so, as if you look at the National Weather Service or NOAA's sort of forecast on La Nina, it's shifting from sort of strong La Nina to what we call neutral.
Right.
And then as we get later in the spring, there's at least some early indications that we may be moving into a favorable El Nino scenario. If that happens, it certainly means, and we're already seeing, like you see, sort of this winter moisture. I mean, we've had, we're well above average moisture for December already, halfway through in West Texas. So, if that trend continues, that planting moisture will make a big difference in terms of, one, how successful are we getting crops up, and two, what's that level of abandonment going to be, in terms of planted to harvested acres. And we know, we talked about this morning, sort of this negative relationship. So as El Nino becomes stronger, abandonment drops pretty significantly nationally, not just in Texas, but nationally. And so, those planted acres become more harvested acres as we do that. So that, I think, a more El Nino environment or a more favorable El Nino environment is probably going to mean maybe a few more planted acres, but also more harvested acres out of those planted acres when we get to the end.
Talked about Farm Bill. We've just come through the midterm elections. Everything is starting to settle into place in terms of who's going to be on what committees and leadership, and we've already got the change in leadership on Ag Committee at this point. But as you mentioned, we're also dealing with a lot of inexperience, on the not just on the committee, but in Congress in general, in terms of agriculture. People who have never been through a farm bill before. What kind of hurdle is that going to be in terms of trying to get the bill put together on schedule this year?
Well, in part it depends on sort of how what I'd call radical those new members are. What happens a lot, most of the time, for most new members, is they get on a committee, they don't know much, they just kind of keep their mouth shut and watch and learn as it is.
And rely on their aides.
And rely on their aides and the staff committee, committee staff to sort of guide them through this process. And to the extent that happens, I think we're okay. I think there's some good leadership. Chairman Thompson will be a good leader. I think there's good. I think there are good members of the committee on both sides of the aisle that have ag interests that will be very focused on getting a good farm bill. The Senate may be a little more challenging in terms of the relative focus, because it'll be a Democrat chair, and they're going to have a bit different idea about where they want to go with a farm bill. But they get it ironed out, I think. If they're more radical, though, I think what happens is you end up a lot of times what I call myth busting, because they come into it with this idea that they know, the Environmental Working Group has told them that blah blah blah, and there's a bit of education that has to take place. And in part that's my role. That's the role of people like Bart Fisher at Farm Policy Center, Pat Westhoff at FAPRI. There's a cadre of people around the country, economists, who've been around a long time, and we do spend some time educating committee staff, and we do it every spring. We have a session. And so I think if they're receptive to that, we'll be okay. But if you do have some radical members that want to make big changes, all of a sudden you get these big fissures that open up.
Right.
And we've seen that in the past. We have seen that in the past when the Tea Party Republicans came in. There was this no, we're not doing any of this stuff. And we finally got a farm bill through and got things done, but it did take a bit longer and a bit more political capital than we're used to giving.
Right. And if you've got a Republican-run House committee and a Democratic-run Senate committee, it makes the reconciliation process a whole lot of fun.
It does. It makes it a bit of a challenge. Like I said, you're going to get this climate. Renewable ag, energy, all that sort of stuff, centric Senate version.
Right.
And you're going to get this Title I crop insurance, farm safety net, Republican version, and they're going to have to somehow reconcile those two.
Yeah. Now, one of the things you did mention this morning is there's one variable that kind of overrides and impacts everything in this market right now, and that is world mill use.
Yes.
Why is that so influential?
Well, I say that in part because, we export 85% of our crop, 90% of our crop years. So world mill use is what sucks that U.S. cotton out into that global market. I used to talk way back when I was at Mississippi State, and I was giving talks to farmers in the Delta, and they'd be, it's dry here in the Delta, and we're not going to yield, and the price is going down. I'm like, guys, what's going on in China and Pakistan has more to do with the world price than what's happening in the Mississippi Delta. It's just relative size. Not that the U.S. isn't important. It is. It's very important. But for us, I think, that world use number encompasses a lot of things, like consumer demand sentiment, the effect of inflation and interest rates and consumer spending, policies even. Those things really drive that world use number, and that world use number is what drives our export number.
Yeah. One of the, just to kind of wrap things up here, one of the words I've heard over and over, or more recently over the last few months, is patience.
Yes.
It's just going to take some time for this to work itself out. Any predictions on how long this process might take?
No, it's, I'd love to say, okay, well, we're looking at a 6 to 8 month window here on sorting through the supply chain consumer issues in the cotton market, for example. But that assumes all else equal, right? The old ceteris paribus from your Econ 101 class. And we just don't live in a ceteris paribus world. I mean, there are going to be other shocks that come along. I mean, nobody anticipated, the Ukrainian invasion, the effect it was going to have, and that sort of thing. So, I think all else equal, we're seeing good signs in Europe, in the U.S. in terms of returns to apparel demand, cotton use that I think are consistent with a very robust market. Even outside of China and Asia, we've seen some robust growth rates in mill use or apparel consumption, which falls back to the mill use. It's in China that's kind of the issue, right? And if we see some relaxation, some movement back towards a more open internal Chinese market, then Katie bar the door. We don't know what's going to happen because there's a lot of pent-up demand inside of China. If that doesn't happen, or it happens slowly, that's obviously going to extend that time period. So again, I'm optimistic that probably over the next 6 months we're going to start seeing the pressure on cotton price to get a bit of price recovery. Obviously, we hope that happens before insurance discovery period. But if it doesn't, the farmers that do end up planting cotton, I think, are going to have some great pricing opportunities late spring into the summer, and so just be on the lookout for that. I think those are there are going to be some great opportunities to price cotton.
When the opportunities come, move quickly.
Move quickly, yes. Because you don't know what's going to happen.
No, not at all. Well, you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
No, right
now.
No, in the last 8 months in the cotton market is proof that if you wait 24 hours, you may lose 2, 3, 4 cents.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
Yep.
Well, Darren, thank you for taking some time. Appreciate it very much. And we'll see you somewhere down the road.
I'm sure at Beltwide or somewhere.
Beltwide, I will definitely be there.
All right.
I'll be the fly in the room.
Okay.
It's probably getting picked on.
Right. Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
So, all right, that's going to be it for the final episode of the Cotton Companion podcast for 2022. It's been a great year. We want to give a special thanks to Dr. Darren Hudson, who holds the distinction of being our final guest for 2022. But we thank him for taking time to sit down and visit with Jim there at that MPE Summit. And as always, we want to thank you, dear listener, for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did and you like what you hear on the Cotton Companion, please evangelize for us. Tell your friends, spread the word about this podcast. Here's where and how they can find us.
You can find the Cotton Companion in 3 easy ways. First, go to cottongrower.com/companion, or simply click the podcast tab at the top of the homepage. Second, subscribe to our channel on iTunes or wherever you find your podcasts these days. And 3, sign up for our weekly e-newsletter, the Cotton Grower e-News, that's delivered to your email inbox every Tuesday morning. You can do that by going to cottongrower.com/subscribe. Also, be sure to follow Cotton Grower on social media. We are at Cotton Grower Mag on Twitter, and on Facebook, you'll find us by searching for Cotton Grower Magazine.
Cotton Companion podcast is produced twice monthly by Tyler Hatch and Kim Henderson, our talented colleagues at the world headquarters for Meister Media Worldwide in beautiful and soon-to-be wintry Willoughby, Ohio. I'm Jim Stedman, he's Beck Barnes, and we'll be back with you in early January to discuss the results of our annual cotton acreage survey and to introduce you to the recipient of the 2022 Cotton Grower Cotton Achievement Award, among other things. Until then, have a safe and wonderful Christmas and a very happy New Year's.
Yeah, he works and he works and he works and he works all day. God made a farmer. Yeah, he works and he works and he works and he works and he works all day. God made a farmer. Yeah, God bless